Obviously, this was a bipartisan effort, and to you, Congressman Gonzalez, first, why make the trip, knowing that the reaction would be just as you discovered from China, that it was provocative, almost as bad as when Nancy Pelosi went, they said?
Yeah, now here in the House, we don't pay attention what the Communist China propaganda puts out. It's important that the House lead, though. And too often we point to the White House for not doing X, Y, or Z. You know, the House of Representatives is an equal branch of government, and this is an area that is a bipartisan effort to go all across the globe and stand with our allies. You know, when I was, you talk about provocative. When I was in the Navy, we used to fly on a P-3 surveillance flights against China, and China would come out and they would harass our airplanes. The exact same thing is happening now. The only thing is they're harassing our P-8s. So this is dangerous. China is being irresponsible in the way they're reacting, and it's important that we have bipartisan direction when we go out and talk about it in the world.
Switching to you, Congressman Khanna, as you know, we're committing now 200 troops to Taiwan. I think from around 30 now. And that is something else that's not been greeted favorably, not surprisingly, by Taiwan. Do you support that? Because some look at that as a preview to coming attractions that will send still more troops and more and more. What do you say?
Our commitment to train Taiwan in its own self-defense is appropriate, and I think there's nothing provocative about American politicians going to Taiwan, given our economic ties with semiconductors, given that Taiwan is a democracy, given that President Carter, who signed the Taiwan Relation Act and recognized China, was in Taiwan in 1999. So there's no reason for China to think that American politicians, continuing in a tradition that President Carter actually started, going to Taiwan is any problem.
So let me ask you both this, Congressman Gonzalez, if China were to invade Taiwan, is that an act of war to which we should commit our troops?
I think the President Biden has made it very clear that we are going to stand with Taiwan, that we are going to remain there by our allies. But we got to get to a point. I spent 20 years in the military. I spent 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to prevent wars. I don't want to see America get dragged into another war, whether that's in Taiwan or
I certainly understand that. But if China invaded Taiwan despite that, is that an act of war to which we should commit troops?
Oh, 100%. And yeah, I would argue that China is doing that exact thing right now in the cyberspace. That's where these wars start. They start in cyber, and then they go on from there. So it's absolutely important that we have a bipartisan delegations continue to make this trek and show that America is going to stand by its allies.
All right. Does that mean then to you as well, Congressman Khanna, that China invading Taiwan to take it back, as it says it's theirs anyway, that we should commit ourselves to protecting Taiwan, defending Taiwan, having U.S. soldiers in Taiwan?
Well, first of all, let me just echo what Representative Gonzalez said. We can and will avoid war in China. That was clear to me meeting the president there and the leadership there. If we help Taiwan build up its defense and deterrence and at the same time have engagement, there's no reason there needs to be war, and that should be the goal. War there would be catastrophic for the world and the American economy. It
certainly sounds like China is preparing for something here. They're not just ranting out of, vapor. So I'm just wondering whether you would support that, if it came to that.
I would support what our policy has been with the Taiwan Relation Act, which says that we will support Taiwan in its defense. It's purposely ambiguous, and it would be the call of the commander-in-chief at the time. I think that policy has served us well from a national security perspective since the days of Nixon and Kissinger, and I affirm that policy.
You know, gentlemen, we got news today that Saudi Arabia is providing $400 million of aid to Ukraine, and a lot of people are wondering the timing of this. Now, Saudi Arabia has had, as you know, Congressman Gonzalez, been cozying up or at least appearing closer to Russia, but that this decision might have turned on the fact that Iran is providing drones and other weapons to the Russians, and that was the last straw. Do you agree with that, Congressman Gonzalez, that had it not been for Iran's involvement in Ukraine to help Russia, Saudi Arabia would never have offered this aid to Ukraine?
I mean, it's certainly interesting to see Saudi Arabia acting on that now. I will say this is a moment in the world's history. Where are you going to fall? Are you going to support the aggressors of Russia who have invaded a sovereign nation, or are you going to stand with those that are fighting for democracy in their homeland? I mean, imagine Texas. I represent Texas. Imagine if someone invaded parts of Texas. We're not just going to say, okay, you can have West Texas as long as we can have everything else. We're going to make sure that every part of Texas came back. So I think it's important that more countries like Saudi Arabia continue to support Ukraine in their effort to defend themselves and their sovereignty.
So, Congressman, Khanna, on the same issue, many Republicans in the House are leading an effort to audit a lot of the monies we give Ukraine. Now, I talked to the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, so she's fine with that. No money is being wasted. Some fear that that type of scrutiny, though, is a precursor to pulling back aid or not as much aid. How do you feel about all this?
We should continue our aid, partly because what Putin has done is illegal and violating the sovereignty of another nation. And to the extent you care about sending a clear message to China that they should not invade Taiwan, we have to succeed in deterring Putin. So I think everyone should really be cheering Ukrainian success. They've had a lot of success on the battlefield. We need to make sure that they're able to maintain their sovereignty.